He was invisible to the world. Just another janitor in a wrinkled khaki uniform, his hands roughened by years of scrubbing floors that never remembered his name. People passed him without a glance, never realizing that behind those weary eyes lived the ghost of a man who once filled concert halls with music. But the grand piano in the corner of the hotel lobby knew. Its black and ivory keys seemed to recognize the touch that once belonged to greatness. Every night, when the chandeliers dimmed and the chatter faded into silence, he would gently brush the dust from its gleaming surface. His fingers would hover above the keys for a moment, trembling, as if remembering a time when they were not meant to clean, but to create. No one ever noticed how tenderly he looked at that piano. No one, until she did. Before we continue, if you believe in compassion, redemption, and the hidden beauty of untold talent, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to heart-touching stories. Your support helps us keep sharing the kind of stories that remind us kindness still exists. Her name was Veronica Langford, an elegant, sharp-witted CEO of a luxury hotel chain. She was known for her poise, her style, and her icy professionalism. People said she walked as though the marble floors existed only for her heels to click upon. And perhaps in a way they did. One evening, during a surprise inspection of the hotel, Veronica caught sight of the janitor standing beside the piano. He was softly humming as he polished the lid, his eyes distant, lost somewhere in memory. With a smirk, she tilted her head. "Do you even know what that is?" she asked, gesturing toward the piano, her tone dripping with sarcasm. The janitor, his name was David, didn't flinch. He simply nodded, still looking at the instrument. "Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major," he said quietly, his voice calm yet heavy with something old and buried. Her laughter echoed through the empty lobby, cold and amused. "If you can actually play Chopin," she teased, "I'll marry you." She didn't mean it, of course. It was a cruel joke tossed carelessly at a man she assumed could never understand her world. But David's eyes didn't waver. She left before he could reply, never realizing that her mocking words had just reopened a chapter of his soul he had tried to keep shut for decades. David once lived a very different life. He had been a prodigy, a child of music, trained in one of Europe's most prestigious conservatories. The world had awaited his rise until tragedy silenced his song. A car crash took his mother, his scholarship, and his piano, all in one night. The grief that followed drowned him completely. Homelessness came next, followed by years of invisible labor. He didn't mop floors because he lacked brilliance, but because life had no patience for broken dreams. His only comfort came from the brief moments he could steal. A few seconds brushing his fingertips across the piano keys, pretending he still belonged to the world of music. That night, after Veronica's careless words, he couldn't sleep. Her mockery played over and over in his head. But beneath it, he heard something else at a challenge. A spark. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He began to practice in secret, arriving hours early and leaving long after the night staff had gone. The piano greeted him like an old friend. At first, his hands stumbled, clumsy and stiff from years of silence. But slowly, the music began to flow again, fragile, trembling, but real. It wasn't just sound. It was memory. It was love. It was the voice of a man rediscovering his soul. A week later, the hotel hosted a grand charity gala. The lobby sparkled with laughter, silk gowns, and champagne. Veronica was there, of course, graceful as ever, surrounded by people who worshipped her success. A small jazz band had been scheduled to perform that night, but due to an unexpected cancellation, the piano stood empty and waiting. And then, David saw his moment. Quietly, he removed his gloves and apron, wiped his hands, and walked toward the piano. The crowd barely noticed him. After all, he was just the janitor. They assumed he was there to adjust something, maybe to clean. But when he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, the first notes of Chopin's Nocturne floated through the air, delicate, haunting, and breathtakingly alive. The conversations died. Glasses froze midair. Every head turned, and Veronica's smile vanished. There he was, her janitor, commanding the grand piano with the grace of a master. His music filled the room, weaving pain and hope into something sacred. Every note carried years of loss, resilience, and unspoken emotion. The lobby transformed, no longer a space of business, but a cathedral of feeling. Some guests began to cry without knowing why. Veronica stood still, her heart trembling, her eyes glistening as realization dawned. The man she had mocked was an artist far greater than she could ever have imagined. When the final note faded, silence hung heavy, a silence so deep it was almost holy. And then, applause. It started softly, then rose into thunder. People stood, cheering, crying, clapping until their hands hurt. But David didn't bask in the glory. He simply stood, bowed slightly, and walked away. His message had already been spoken, not in words but in melody. Later that night, Veronica found him quietly folding towels in the supply room. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were?" He smiled gently. "Because," he said, "no one ever asked." Her eyes shimmered with regret, and maybe something like respect. She had joked about marrying him once, but now, the weight of those words hung differently in the air. From that day forward, David never wore the janitor's uniform again. Veronica offered him a permanent place, not as staff, but as the hotel's official pianist. Guests came from far and wide, not just to stay in her luxurious suites, but to hear the man whose music could make even the coldest heart feel again. And Veronica changed too. The woman who once led with pride began to lead with compassion. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit by the piano as David played, listening not just with her ears, but with her heart.